the Conservative Cat Show. I so do appreciate you being here this morning. Go ahead, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Did JB Pritzker just sign legislation that will end up drugging children, therefore making Big Pharma very, very rich? We're going to be talking about that legislation. We've talked about it before. If you've missed those shows, you guys can go check them out in the archives. This has to do with the mental health screenings of children ages 3rd grade through 12th grade. So we're going to be talking about that legislation a little bit because now it's getting some national attention, which is interesting. The position that people at a national level have taken about this legislation. I didn't talk about drugging up the children. Obviously, that's something that they're going to recommend after these mental health screenings take place. I took the position that, hey, they're trying to divide children from their parents. They're trying to cause this division in the schools where the kids go to the teacher rather than the parent when they have an issue with, say, something like depression or anxiety or something like that, rather than going to God or going to their parents who would redirect them to God. They're going to go to a therapist. And I've always taken the position that therapy is just anti-biblical. We should be going to the counselor, not a counselor. And we should be going to biblical pastors, pastors who will counsel you and shepherd you towards the counselor. And yeah, I just take the position that therapy is evil. I think that it's a modern, worldly, secular solution to things that are actually very spiritual. So depression, anxiety, those are demons, and you need to go to the Father, the counselor, to help you with those issues. And the children, they could potentially be drugged up. Obviously, this is really good for politicians and good for Big Pharma because you're getting them while they're young, Big Pharma patients. So we're going to get to that, but we're also going to be talking about the Texas Democrats. I called this yesterday. I knew that they were going to go back home. Okay, they fled to stop the redistricting vote, and guess what? They folded like a bad poker hand. Okay, I knew that they were going to go back home because they're losers. And later, we are going to be talking about this bill. It's kind of fascinating, and it passed unanimously out of Springfield. But sometimes I come across these, and I'm like, man, if I was a legislator, I would vote no all of the time. There's no reason to be legislating anything new. We have laws on the books. I think that we need to get rid of some of the laws. Less government. So some of these Republicans, actually all of them, voted for this. I don't like it. I don't like SB 2040. I think it's a power grab, and I think that the bureaucrats are taking your keys to your tow truck with this bill. I think that we already had laws on the books that could have addressed the bad actors in the industry. And this is just giving bureaucrats more power, and I'm anti that. And you would think that Republicans would be, but nope, we have a bunch of losers in Springfield. People who voted for this. I mean, I don't get it. Sometimes I'm just like, I mean, there's some good people in Springfield, some good politicians, some good representatives, but then I come across bills like this, and I'm like, did you even read it? Or did you just not want to be the sole dissenter? And you just voted yes and voted unanimously because you didn't want to cause any waves or ruffles. And if that's the case, you have no courage, no spine. What's wrong with you? All right, so let's start with this. Picture this. You and your spouse, you walk into the elementary school for a parent-teacher conference, okay? And you are expecting to see your kids spelling words, maybe a few spelling tests, maybe a few math worksheets, maybe some finger paintings, okay, of a turkey, okay, something cute. And you're excited to see the work that your kid has come up with because you're thinking to yourself, man, I hope that he carries on my creative legacy. I hope that he's a creative kid. And I'd like to see some of his work that he does in school. So you kind of already get like the gist because he brings his homework home and you know what he's doing in the classroom because you pay attention at home because you're a good parent. And This meeting is supposed to just be a formality. It's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to sit down and hear all about the cool things that your kid is doing in elementary school and the cute things that he's doing in elementary school. So you sit down with the teacher, and the moment you sit down, she skips over all the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, the art that he does in the classroom. She leans in and tells you that your son is hyperactive and hey, it's likely he has ADHD and he should be evaluated and medicated. And you think to yourself, I mean, you're floored by her evaluation and her suspicion that your child needs to be medicated. And you're floored by that, and perhaps you get snarky with her and you say, if it was me, and I dared send my child to public school, pull your kids out. I mean, that's the only solution forward. I've told you that for years. Take your kids out of public school. There's no reason to be putting them into these hellholes. They're not learning anything, reading, math, and arithmetic. Now they're just like little guinea pigs for pharma. And we're going to get to the mental health screenings here in just a second. But if it was me, right, I would probably be a little snarky. You guys know me. You watch the show. I'd have like a hint of sarcasm in my voice. And I'd be like, so what medical degree did you get? And where'd you go to medical school, ma'am? And what made you come to your diagnosis of my child that he has ADHD? And your spouse, maybe your wife is being a little bit more diplomatic. I would not be diplomatic in this situation. I would be snarky and sarcastic. But maybe your spouse is a little bit more diplomatic and asks the question, hey, what specific behaviors, Mrs. Smith, are you seeing that my son has that would require medication? Why do you think our son needs medication? And the teacher, Mrs. Smith, she lists them out and she says, oh, well, he fidgets a lot. He fidgets, especially after worksheets, especially after he's done with whatever he's doing. He'll fidget. He'll start looking around the room. He's very active. So your spouse looks at you and you look at her, and then you say, well, isn't he just acting like a boy then? Okay, he's just acting like a small boy, isn't he? Fidgeting, being pretty hyperactive, running around, looking around the room. So you suggest some constructive criticism, some constructive classroom strategy and some criticism and some classroom strategies that she can take, and you decline the thought of medication. He doesn't need it. He's just a boy. And hey, perhaps he needs a little bit more outdoor time. Perhaps he needs a little bit more room to be creative. See, but public school isn't about that. And that's why it's so hard. When you have a teacher, and what authority really do you have to stand on when you're a parent, okay, and you send your kid to somewhere for 8 hours a day, and the teacher's with them for most of the day. You might get to see your kid for a few hours a night. I mean, you should probably take the teacher's word for it. I mean, you know that it's wrong, but what leg do you have to stand on when you don't see your child for the majority of the day, and this teacher sees your child more than you do? So you can try to suggest different classroom strategies, constructive classroom strategies to address the hyperactivity or the lack of attention that your boy is displaying, but you really don't have a leg to stand on because you're not with the kid. So I think you got to pull them out of public school. This is how we fix this. Okay, just pull them out completely. I know that's not realistic. But we fast forward now, and we're going to be talking about the mental health screenings, okay? Because this new law that was just signed by Governor JB Pritzker could make this conversation that you have with the teacher absolutely obsolete. Because what's ultimately going to happen with this new legislation, there's already a system in place where the paperwork is going to be drawn up before you get there for a suggested treatment plan. That is what these mental health screenings are probably going to do. You're going to get there at the parent-teacher conference, and they're already going to have the paperwork drawn up, and they're going to suggest a treatment plan for little Timmy, who just happens to be a little bit hyperactive because, I don't know, he's a third grade boy. Okay. But standing, in Evanston, at this Chute Middle School in Evanston, Illinois, he signed 1560. This is Senate Bill 1560. That's Governor JB Pritzker. We've talked about this bill at length. This makes Illinois the first state to require mental health screenings for all students ages 3rd grade through 12th grade, starting in 2027. There is an opt-out form. You can opt out of this. This is what I recommend you do. Pritzker at the press conference, of course, while he was signing the bill outside of this little middle school in Evanston, Illinois, he says, quote, "This is a nation first worth celebrating." Wow. So the test, I've gone through at length the test, each and every single answer. It asks about your children's sexual orientation. There's questions about your child's sexual orientation on there. There's questions about substance use. If you want to go check out the test and like what the mental health screening actually looks like, you can look this up. It's called PHQ-9. This is a 9-question depression screening tool. It's pretty standard. If you answer yes to any of the prompts, the student is going to be flagged as depressed or having some sort of mental health disorder, okay? And therefore making them a candidate for medication, therefore making them a Big Pharma patient, forever a Big Pharma patient. So the creator of this mental health screening test, and not a lot of people have talked about this in the state, the creator of this wasn't even a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or even a nurse. And like I said, psychiatry and psychology, even if it was created by those types of folk, I would still hate it because therapy is anti-Christian. If you are a Christian, you should definitely opt out of this because it is anti-Christian to be seeking counseling in a secular format. Okay, you should be seeking counseling from your shepherd, whether that be a pastor, who can direct you really to the counselor. We've replaced God, the counselor, with secular counselors. Anyway, so this PHQ-9 test, it's pretty standard. I mean, it's everywhere. It's a 9-question depression screening, but it wasn't even created by anybody in the medical field, by the way. The guy who created the test was a guy who was a marketing executive. Drumroll, please. Pfizer. Yes, a pharmaceutical giant. So that is a huge conflict of interest, in my opinion. But Springfield apparently doesn't care, or they won't hear it, or they don't have the cojones to listen to that. And they're just going to gaslight you into thinking, oh, well, you ought to care if your kid is depressed. Don't you care if your kid needs mental health help? Okay, mental health, and I hate the people who are like mental health stigmas and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, there should be a stigma, okay? There should be, hey, mental health is not something to be worn as like a badge of honor. Your anxiety, your PTSD, your depression, all of these things are, in my opinion, demonic. And I'm not saying that you're a bad person. I'm saying that it takes a supernatural higher power to pull you out of things like anxiety and depression. And you have to call out to Jesus, and in his name, those things will flee. And it's really unfortunate that we have destigmatized mental health ailments. We should stigmatize them as bad. Okay. A lot of times you'll hear kids like saying, oh, I have anxiety, and they almost wear it like a fur coat, and it bothers the hell out of me. Like, who cares? Like, I do care that you have mental health issues, like, and I want you to get better, but these kids nowadays, they always say like, my anxiety is a part of me. We have to destigmatize mental health, and we have to realize that this is just a part of life. No, it's not normal to be clinically depressed. No, it's not normal to have anxiety to the point where you can't order at a fast food restaurant or be on the phone with somebody else, okay, or hold a conversation. That is not normal behavior. That is demonic activity, and it needs to be expelled out of that person in the name of Jesus. All right. So clinical depression isn't something that you can diagnose between bell rings, okay? They want to put out this 9-question questionnaire, the screening. And it's like a 1-page checklist, okay? And you're never going to get to the issues, the trauma. You're never going to expel that disorder from that person using a 1-sheet checklist, okay? If a student has issues like anxiety or ADHD, like true ADHD, which is overdiagnosed, misdiagnosed all the time, I don't even really think that it's as prevalent as people say. But true attention disorders, which are out there, trauma, substance abuse, things like that, the PHQ-9 questionnaire is going to miss the big picture entirely. These are things, issues that cannot be fixed by a 9-question questionnaire or screening, okay? Former National Institute of Mental Health Director Tom Insel, he put this very bluntly. He said, there's more to treating depression than writing a prescription. Okay, the Duke University psychiatrist, who I'm not a big fan of psychiatry or psychology. I think that this is a secular, anti-biblical solution to disorders that are demonic and require supernatural healing and power. Anyway, so the university psychiatrist Alan Francis, he says, quote, there's a tendency to not even look at the patient. You check the boxes, you stamp the diagnosis, and then you move on. That is exactly what this mental health screening was created to do. Check the boxes, stamp the diagnosis, prescribe, you move on. Okay, in other words, the test scores you, and then it says, okay, you're depressed. And then your quick fix is going to be Zoloft or Prozac or you name it, right? And we never really asked why the student feels this way or feels the way they do. So, yeah, here's the catch-22. So tune in, get close, because you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you opt out of this thing, like I said, you can. If you need the sheet, I have it via PDF. You can email me, conservativecatbarker@gmail.com. You can expect, if you opt out, the administrators to start asking you questions like, hey, why'd you opt out? You can expect your child's teacher to observe your child's behaviors and flag them to the school counselor or the school psychologist anyway. That's most likely what's going to happen. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you take the test, your child is likely going to be labeled as depressed, especially if they're having like a bad day. Okay, kids have bad days. And, some of those questions, how I would even answer, yes to some of them if I was having a bad day. They're children, and at 3rd grade, they don't understand what they're taking. This is a diagnosis. Okay, this is a questionnaire to provide me a diagnosis. And the kids don't understand that. So if they're having a bad day, they might answer the questions based on that day, and they're not actually depressed, but the test is going to label them depressed anyway. So parents, they're constantly guilt tripped. They are told, hey, well, don't you want to know if your kid is depressed? Big Pharma wants a fresh supply of young customers. That's what this is really all about. Blue states like Illinois, potentially California. I'm surprised that California doesn't have anything quite like this. They are likely going to follow, by the way, California, New York, we're the first state to do a mental health screening, Illinois. But they're going to follow Illinois' lead, of course. And we know in California, even here in the state of Illinois, we know that kids are allowed to change their gender without really parental consent or parents even knowing. So I will never forget this. The Illinois Teachers Association, the Education Association, in a mass email. Okay, so Bloomington Education Association. There was an email that was sent out to teachers, and they said, hey, you have to obtain written consent from the children, from the students, in order to out them to their parents. And by out, you mean, like if they're gay or if they're transgender, you need to obtain as a teacher written consent from the child in order to disclose the child's sexual orientation or gender identity to the parent. Okay, so that is where we're at here in the state of Illinois. And in the end, it's a very simple equation. Check enough boxes, you're depressed. Okay, if the kid checks enough of these boxes on the PHQ-9 test, they're going to be labeled as depressed, and then they're going to put that child on a suggested treatment plan, which would include things like Zoloft and Prozac likely. And if you opt out, another part of this equation, you're probably depressed, and we're going to be observing you, and we're going to recommend that you go see our psychologist anyway. And then we're going to label you depressed, and then we're going to recommend a treatment plan for you anyway. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. But obviously opting out is something that I would suggest you do. The testing starts in a couple of years, so 2027. And you need to consider yourself warned. Consider yourself warned. Good luck, parents. Good luck, kids. My recommendation, pull them out altogether. Get them out of these public schools, because clearly it's not about finger paintings and math and spelling tests anymore. It's not about that stuff anymore. It is about mental health screenings and gender identity. And how can we conceal this child's gender identity from the parent? How can we label this child and put labels on this child and then get them to be big pharma patients? Like, that is what school is all about now, public school. So good luck. And parents, this isn't the first time the world has tried this, by the way. I want to get this Christian worldview, this Christian perspective in there. This is the first time the world has tried to take control of children's minds and hearts with and remind you, therapy and modern mental health practices, that stuff has been around not very, very long. I'd say since the 70s, or I'd have to look that up when therapy really started to get big. But it's not super, it's sort of new, relatively new. And it's a secular form of counseling, and it's really just anti-Bible. Okay, I want to go to Daniel chapter 1. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon took the young Israelites from their homes, not to harm them physically at first, but he wanted to re-educate them. He changed their names. He taught them the Babylonian language. He tried to feed them Babylonian food and make them forget where they belonged and who they belonged to, God. Okay. And when you slap these labels on these kids, they think they belong to their disease or their ailment. You'll see kids nowadays on Instagram put it in their bios, like in their Instagram bios and their Twitter bios, and they'll say anxiety, PTSD, ADHD. And they wear it as if it's like a fur coat. It's ridiculous. So Daniel resolved in his heart, did not defile himself. He stood firm, and God honored his faithfulness in that story. And today's enemy, their strategy really hasn't changed. Now it wears a modern face, and the modern face here is therapy and psychiatry and psychology and diagnosing and treatment with Prozac, Zoloft, you name it. Okay, instead of Babylonian food, okay, it's the pharmaceutical pills. Instead of the Babylonian language, it's the psychology labels. Okay, the psychologists' labels. The goal is the same: reshape the next generation's identity. They want to reshape the next generation's identity and make them forget who they are in Christ and make them their illness. Okay, therapists will tell you that you have anxiety. It can be managed, but this is a part of who you are, and don't feel bad about it. Don't stigmatize it, right? This is who you are. It's no different than you having blue eyes and brown hair. That's no different. This is just who you are. And that is just wrong. Parents, guard your children. Know that what they're being taught, know what they're being taught, and tested and told in these schools. And like Daniel, train them up to stand even when the culture bows. Okay, so I want to shift gears. Let me get to some of your comments this morning. The book of Daniel is probably the greatest book in the Bible. Yeah, one of my favorites as well. Right now I'm in Acts. I like that book too. But the book Daniel, really good. Make them their own worst enemy. I hate therapy. I think that's exactly what they do. Yeah, they make you feel like you're crazy when you need some self-reflection and some prayer. Yeah, so they'll never tell you. A therapist is never going to tell you to pray and call out to Jesus. Just saying the name of Jesus in some cases can make those things flee. I know when I start to feel anxious, if I just say to myself or mumble to myself, Jesus, 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 come, Holy Spirit, be with me, Jesus, 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 instantly my anxiety goes away. I mean, sometimes kids just need to be told, hey, have you said the word out loud, Jesus? Have you said his name out loud before? Give it a try for me. Like, that would be my first thing. If I was a therapist, that would be the first thing I would recommend a child do, is just simply call out loud the name of Jesus, call out to Jesus. But they'll never say that. They'll never tell you to do that, although it works, right? There's power in that name. Why do we have mental health screenings? Why don't we have a mental health screenings for all of our elected officials? Yeah, I'm going to get to this bill and you're going to be like, yeah, I don't know what Republican in their right mind would vote for this thing. And it's just disappointing. Like, I think that it's more so a lot of these elected officials, they get in there and they want to make friends. So then they do these crazy things and they vote yes on these crazy bills. And the only reason why they vote yes, in this case, I think it's with this bill, a lot of these people voted yes. A lot of Republicans voted no for the mental health screenings, but some did. Some voted yes for the mental health screenings. The only reason why they did that is because they feel guilty, or, don't you want the kids to get the mental health they need, health help they need? Don't you want to know if these kids are depressed? And what about the suicides that kids are committing? They'll throw that in your face, and, then you vote a certain way. Or this one bill that we're going to get to today, don't you want to hold bad actors accountable? Well, yes, but we already have laws on the books that would hold those bad actors accountable. Why do we have to expand the powers of government and bureaucracy even more? Why don't we just follow the laws that we have in the books? Well, don't you want, and it's a towing bill, it's about predatory towing. Don't you want the mom to get her car seat out of the car? These they're extorting her. They're making her pay her towing fee before she can get her car seat out of the car. Don't you want to stop that? Like, it's all about guilt tripping. And these elected officials, they aren't thinking logically. It's feminized legislating. Okay, when people talk about down with the patriarchy, really what they're talking about is feminizing legislature, feminizing the legislature and the way we conduct political business. That's what they're talking about when they say down with the patriarchy. Okay. And I am all for the patriarchy, because really what the patriarchy is using a masculine approach in governing. So you think logically rather than with your emotions, which is why I would never be a politician. Why I think it's really hard for female politicians. There's very few female politicians out there that I would say, yes, she's a good one, because they tend to vote with emotion. Okay, it's just something that is very hard to separate from yourself. Okay, as a legislator, I'd imagine it's very hard to stop your biological urge to be emotional and compassionate. Women just tend to be a little bit more emotional and compassionate, and they tend to think worst case scenario. which is why these elected officials will legislate based on a very small minority, okay, because they take the extremes and then they legislate based on the extremes. So, for example, I've talked about this before. They wanted to ban all savanna cats or ownership of savanna cats or exotic animals, whatever, because some kid somewhere was snarled at by a savanna cat. Well, I'll tell you what a man is going to think automatically, or the masculine logical approach, the patriarchy approach to this would be, well, I mean, how often does this happen? Oh, it was one kid? Okay, well, that's a one-off. Okay, next. That's how the man is going to approach that bill, okay? Here's how a woman will approach it. Well, what if this happened to the child? What if the kid was mauled, And that is where the female mind goes, which is why, I am pro-patriarchy. I really am. I'm pro-patriarchy. When it comes to governing, you have to use logic. It's not logical to say things like, oh, there's big cats running around everywhere and we have to ban all savanna cats or all ownership of savanna cats, or we have to give overwhelming, really, power to these bureaucracies in order for them to protect people from predatory towers. Okay, we have to do this. So we're going to get to that bill here in just a second. I do want to talk about the Texas Democrat legislators who fled to the blue states, New York, Illinois being one of them, to deny quorum for redistricting. They have officially folded. So I'm not sure people expected them to fold so soon. I didn't expect them to fold so soon. I did expect them to fold, and it was mainly because I saw Gene Wu, or whatever his name is, from Texas. He was getting out there and, the crocodile tears and whining and complaining about them not being with their families and whatever. So I suspected the runaways would go back, next week or the following week, but they're going back like now, the Texas Democrats. So they lost. According to ABC News, the runaways who claim to be saving democracy, they are now headed back to their home state early, claiming that they have accomplished their goal of, quote, awareness about gerrymandering. That's a pretty polite way of saying we lost. We failed miserably. The Texas Democrats, that's what they did. They failed miserably. So ABC 13 confirmed with multiple sources that the House Democrats are returning to Texas. Eyewitness News, ABC Eyewitness News, has not confirmed the date of which they're going to return. But we do know that they are now publicly saying that they've accomplished their mission and that they're going to be going back very soon. So it's not like a week or two from now. This is like within days, I think, they're going to be going back. So the Democrats believe that they've accomplished their mission by killing the first session and by raising national awareness about the mid-decade redistricting effort. It's unclear which day they're going to be going back to Austin, to the Capitol, but they stressed that they will push for Hill County flooding relief to be the priority. So the Democrats are going to go back and they're going to push that this flooding relief is going to be their top priority and that they should pass that stuff first and address that stuff first before the redistricting, which I'm not against. I think that, yes, you shouldn't have flood in the first place and you should have addressed the flood aid to begin with and the flood relief to begin with. And honestly, they should have pushed for that while they were there. And then when it came to the other legislative item, the redistricting, then flee, get the other business out of the way and then get to the redistricting. But they didn't do that. So now they're going to be going back and they're going to be pushing for the flood relief to be the main priority, which yes, as they should. Like I said, Gene Wu He was already out there crying a river about his colleagues' hardships and about how hard it was for them to be in these blue states and away from their families. So I guessed that this would happen soon, considering Gene Wu was out there on MSNBC crying a river. We're going to get to that clip here in just a second. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. I will get to some of your comments on the other side. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Welcome back to Conservative Cat Clips, where we cut through the spin, we call out the nonsense, and we do it all with an unapologetic American flair. I'm your host, Cat, and today we're exposing the truth behind nonprofit organizations and how they helped fuel the border crisis. Let's be real, Joe Biden, he took an exit, but he left a border-sized crater in our national security, and really the biggest, sneakiest players weren't the politicians or the cartels, really. Those nonprofit organizations, yep, the tax-free do-gooders, they ran logistics for a mass illegal immigration operation. Take Catholic Charities, for instance. Catholic Charities USA, they pocketed $1.4 billion in 2022 alone. More than 60% of that came from government grants, your tax dollars. Then they turned around, used those tax dollars for bus rides, hotel rooms, and legal defense for people who blatantly broke our federal immigration laws. HIAS, they got millions in grants, and then they resettled people deep into the United States. They didn't do any kind of vetting, no transparency, and they had zero regard for the towns impacted by this overrun, like Springfield, Ohio. And just because the administration changed doesn't mean that the nonprofit conveyor belt has stopped. These groups have built a machine, and they built a machine under Joe Biden, and they're still using it to move tens of thousands of people, often under the radar. According to congressional watchdogs, just 4 major national profits helped transport and shelter over 35,000 illegal migrants in a single month. Just 4 helped transport and shelter 35,000 illegal immigrants in a single month. This is insane. That's not charity. That's infrastructure for illegal immigrants, and you helped pay for it. They housed them. They gave them hotel rooms. They gave them legal representation. And you helped pay for it, and you didn't even know it. Whether you knew it or not, they didn't care. Even now, as the new administration tries to restore law and order, these nonprofit organizations, they're lawyering up, they're pushing lawsuits, and they're working overtime to try to stall these deportations and keep the broken pipeline flowing. They want that pipeline to keep flowing, where they take tens of thousands of people and then they give them jobs. And they put them in jobs where they're ultimately going to be used as slave labor, because these companies are going to hang their illegal status over their heads. It's time to cut the cash, investigate the players, pull the nonprofit masks off, and we need to close up the border. We need to pull the nonprofit mask off the open borders agenda. Because if a group is using government money to move, house, and protect people in violation of federal law, that's not compassion, it's collusion. And I'll call it that. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. I'm Cat, reminding you that the border crisis wasn't built by weak presidents. It really wasn't built by Joe Biden. It was powered by rich nonprofits hiding behind halos and hashtags. And our laws were trampled all over, and our communities were overwhelmed. Let's clean it up, and let's do it for real this time and defang these nonprofits. Hey, good morning. I appreciate you being here this morning. Welcome to the Conservative Cat Show. We are going to be playing that clip, Gene Wu. I did want to come out because I wanted to make sure I fact-checked myself. 1970s, I was right. There was the emergence of what's called DBT. This is the dialect behavior therapy. This was something that's kind of new. Now, in the 1950s, there was some behavioral approaches, some cognitive and behavioral approaches in the 1950s. But really, the explosion of this whole, like, you sit down with a therapist and talk to them about your problems, the talk therapy exploded in the 1970s. So this was DBT approaches to therapy. That's when it all kind of started. So it's modern, it's secular, And like I said, we should be going to the counselor, not a counselor. Make them their own worst enemy. I hate therapy. I think that's exactly what they do. They make you feel crazy when really you just need some self-reflection and prayer. That's why they do what they do. That's what they do. Think of the kids. And then if you're not on board with them, they'll be like, well, you don't love the kids. You don't want them to think better and feel better for themselves. Yeah, so that's exactly what they're doing with this mental health screening thing. They're gaslighting parents and legislators into being proponents of the mental health screenings by saying things like, oh, what, you don't care about your kid's mental health? You don't care to find out if your kid is depressed? No, I do care, but this is not the approach to depression. Really, the approach starts in the home. The parents are to lead and train up that child in Christ and point them to the counselor. And like I said, if I was a therapist, I would just have the child call out the name of Jesus and see if that worked. That's the first thing you should do. But the therapist would never, ever say that. They'll definitely label you and they'll say, okay, you have anxiety. This is, not something you should be ashamed of. This is how therapists approach it, which is so dumb. Like, anxiety is a bad thing. Okay. It doesn't feel good. It should be labeled as bad. Depression should be labeled as bad and stigmatized as bad and something that you should not, and that you can be cured of. These are not traits that you have that are similar to your hair color or eye color. Okay. These are ailments and you need a solution to your ailment. They'll say, oh, well, it'll never go away, but you can treat it with this pill and you have to be on this pill the rest of your life. And that's what they want for your children. Okay. So before I took the break, I was telling you a little bit about the Texas Democrats, and I'm not kind of shocked at how fast this kind of happened. I thought for sure that it would be at least a couple of weeks before they would go back to their home state. The Texas Democrats who fled to Illinois, fled to New York. There were signs that they were going to leave those blue states for their home state, though, because Gene Wu, he showed up on MSNBC and he was crying a river about how he and his colleagues were facing hardships. So I knew that they were going to go back. Good thing about them going back is they did stress that the Texas Democrats have stressed that they want to address the flood relief and the flood aid first and have that be their main priority, which I don't think that they're going to get pushback from the Republicans on that. Like, oh no, we have to do the mid-decade redistricting first. No, they're not going to say that. The Texas Republicans are going to put flood aid as a priority. And it's really sad that the Texas Democrats didn't see that as a priority when they left. Let's take a listen to Gene Wu on MSNBC. Here we go.
But there is no other choice. Just like we had no choice but to leave Texas to stop this corruption, other states, we're telling them, you have no choice now. You have to do this distasteful thing, or our democracy, our nation, the American dream is gone. It's toast. It's over.
So, Gene, based on what you're saying, should we anticipate that this is going to go on for another couple of weeks with Texas lawmakers, Democratic lawmakers, staying out of state and breaking quorum?
Yeah, we're doing our absolute best to hold on, and it's not easy. And like you all said before, we have lots of expenses, lots of fees. People are calling in bomb threats. People are threatening to use FBI on us. They're harassing our families back in Texas. They're trying to break into people's houses. They're trying to do all sorts of things to try to get us. This is a lot of stress on not only us, but on our families and our loved ones. We're not Republicans. We're not wealthy. Most of us are working class people, right? And there's members who they live paycheck to paycheck. And that's the reality for most Americans. And we're going to try to hold out as long as we can, do absolutely everything we can. But we're human beings. At some point, we can't go on, but we're trying to buy enough time that other people come in and fight with us. And we're asking all Americans and all Texans, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican or nothing at all, either fight for what you believe in, fight for America that believes in fairness, hard work, or it's over, right? don't say that, once it's gone, don't say like, well, I didn't know. We're telling you now, we're trying to buy you time.
Wow. Man. So he says, we're doing our absolute best to hold on. It's not easy. He said this like a couple of days ago. So I knew that he's crying a river essentially. So I knew that they were going to leave eventually. I did not think that it was going to be probably within this week. Now, we don't have an exact day of when they're going to go back to Texas. They have said things like they want to address the flood aid before the redistricting. I'm not opposed to that. Yes, obviously we should, rank these legislative items. There's like 18 legislative items that they should be looking at. And they should rank those items and then address the ones that take priority over, obviously, redistricting. I'm not against that. I don't think the Texas Republicans are against that. So he goes on, he says, it's not easy. And like you said before, we have lots of expenses, lots of fees. There are people calling bomb threats. There are people threatening to use the FBI on us. They're harassing our families back in Texas. They're trying to break into people's houses. Very dramatic. Okay. Now, the bomb threat, I saw this story. It was really not that credible. Okay. It wasn't like it was dismissed in the news. Like, it was literally a news story for maybe an hour or two. And then it went away because it really wasn't a credible threat. And people using the threat or threatening to use the FBI on us. Yeah, you're breaking the law. Okay. You guys left your duty, your job, and under the Texas Constitution, there were arrest warrants out on you. So yeah, using the FBI, there you fled, okay, and you went across state lines. That requires FBI help, obviously, not just Texas enforcement. You need the federal enforcement because you cross state lines and there's no arrest warrant for you in another state. So coordinating with federal authorities to bring you back and to arrest you for your crimes. Yeah, like, of course the FBI is going to be used on you. Duh. Harassing our families back in Texas. Obviously, if that's going on, that's wrong. Breaking into people's houses. That's wrong. But, the people are very upset in Texas because they're supposed to do a important job of flood aid. Now, that doesn't excuse any kind of harassing behavior. However, I will say that, you've pushed people to a breaking point. They elected you to go do that job. You're paid by their tax dollars. You need to go do your job. Okay. You are anti-democracy. You're not fighting for democracy. You're anti-democracy. And you're pretty much throwing a temper tantrum till you get your way. It's like tyrannical. Okay. You're like little tyrants. No wonder you're starting to push people to a breaking point, and that shouldn't shock you that you're starting to see backlash. Now, of course, the harassment, if it leads to destruction of property, anything like that, then they need to be held accountable. Anybody who's doing that is totally wrong. But I will say you're pushing people to a breaking point by being little tyrants. Because that's exactly what you're doing. You're not participating in democracy and in this process that we've elected you to go do. And you're pushing your constituents to a breaking point, and now they're rising up. This is what happens when tyranny and fascism, actual fascism, starts to rear its ugly head. You start to have a mutiny. Okay. So he says this is not only a lot of stress on us, but our family, our loved ones. We're not Republicans. We're not wealthy. Hilarious coming from him. He's an attorney. He's probably very wealthy. Okay. I wouldn't say an attorney is a working class guy. Okay. He says most of us are working class people. There are members who live paycheck to paycheck. We're going to try to hold out as long as we can, but we're human beings. At some point, we can't go on. We're trying to buy enough time that other people can come in and fight with us. In other words, the pressure campaign that the Republicans put forth was effective and you lost. Okay. So what they did, the Republicans, they stopped the direct deposits of their checks, their paychecks And they promised to call multiple special sessions. So they wouldn't end this special session, and they were going to call multiple special sessions to keep the Texas Democrats stranded in these blue states, to keep like pretty much playing chicken with them. Like, oh, we're going to call another special session. Are you going to come back? you know? So it would have kept them in these blue states indefinitely unless they returned to provide quorum. Okay. So they were also incurring daily fines. I think it was like $500 a day or something like that. That all started to add up. And these are legislators who might not be independently wealthy. And it's only a matter of time before the donor class, the Democrat donors, the leftist organizations, it's only a matter of time before they realize like, hey, we're funding a dead end here. We should probably pull out the funds. So you have to factor in also the time away from their families, and none of it was ever really sustainable with them being in these blue states, especially when you had this pressure campaign in an effective pressure campaign from the Republicans. So the day that they fled the state, the Texas Democrats had a choice. They could have done it the easy way or the hard way. But redistricting was going to pass either way. Okay, so in the end, they opted for the easy way, virtue signaling for less than 2 weeks, okay, before declaring victory in the face of defeat, and then running back home with their tails tucked between their legs and voting on the damn thing anyway. Okay, so this was sort of the easy way. The hard way would have been to stay up there for a longer period of time, actually been arrested. See, and this is how you know it's virtue signaling, because they're not serious. Okay, it's all theatrics, it's all political theater. If they were really serious about it, about defending democracy, you would think that they wouldn't mind being arrested, and that they would, have convictions, right? If you truly think that democracy is at stake here, then I would imagine I would be arrested for something I believe in like that, right? So is this over? Do they just fly back, fly across state lines and lay down their arms, and, they come back for the next special session? Frankly, I don't think that it should be over. I think that they were afforded an olive branch back in 2021 when they did the same thing. They delayed an election reform bill vote, and they did the same thing. And they clearly didn't learn their lesson from 2021. I think playtime is over. I think the time for being nice is over. I think that the arrest warrants that passed the Texas House should still be enforced. I think that they should be arrested and jailed. And I don't think that we should give them any time to go home. I think as soon as the wheels hit the airport, they should, do press hits. They should, arrest them, and they shouldn't have any time to go home and cry or do any kind of grandstanding, anything like that. I say slap the cuffs on them as soon as the wheels hit the runway. And they get out of the plane. I say arrest them, drag them straight to the Texas Capitol, and have them answer for really their crimes. And I think that there should be some bribery investigations done. There was talk of that. Greg Abbott conducting bribery investigations in order to pay their fees off. Were they using left-wing organizations and soliciting donations for that? And were they paying for their fees through political action committees or left-wing organizations? And does that amount to bribery? So yeah, I think that should continue. I think that they had their warning in 2021. They didn't learn their lesson. They should be arrested, and they should have to answer for their crime of fleeing their duties. In Proverbs 28, verse 1, and I want to bring this home biblically for you, the Christian worldview, the Christian perspective. Scripture says, the wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion. So when the lawmakers fled their state to avoid doing their jobs, they thought that they were standing up for democracy. In reality, they were running away from their responsibility, and they were running away from the democratic process. standing there debating and losing with grace. Okay, like Jonah trying to sail away from God's calling, they learned that they can't outrun accountability. Okay, and these Texas Democrats have learned that, like Jonah did. And notice when the pressure got real, when the money dried up and the heat was turned up a little bit, and the arrest warrants started coming, they came home. And what really bothers me about it is that they came home and they started to declare victory in the middle of defeat. Like, you are defeated. Okay, you can't claim victory. This is the oldest political trick in the book, by the way. Lose a fight and then pretend you meant to lose that fight. But God's word is clear. The true leaders don't run away. Okay, when the battle gets hard, they stand their ground. These people have no true convictions. Obviously, this was political theater, because if they were serious about standing up for democracy, they would get arrested. Okay, they are facing the truth. Now they have to serve their people that they represent, and I think that they should have to answer for their crime of leaving their duty and of really being fascist, okay, and little tyrants and spitting in the faces of the people who elected them to go do their job. Next time, people should take note what Texas Democrats fled to these blue states. And next time, you should elect people who are more like lions and aren't runners, okay? And when our leaders flee their duty, it's up to the people to hold them accountable, because in the end, there's no hiding from the truth. All right, I got to take a quick break, but we're going to come back and we're going to talk about that predatory towing bill, the Senate Bill 2040. This passed unanimously, mind you, and everybody's patting their heads or patting their backs, themselves on the back, like they just solved world hunger. Like, this is such a dumb bill. I'll be right back. Smash that like button and share this out with your friends. Hey, you're listening to the Conservative Cat Clips. This is the place where we don't call 911 first. Nope, we pray, we prepare, and yes, we pack heat. Every time there's a tragedy, the media and the Democrats, they start crying, do something, and do something. And what they mean is more laws, more bans, and more restrictions, not on criminals, mind you, but on law-abiding citizens. So let me tell you what evil doesn't care about. They don't care about legislation. The man willing to break the sixth commandment, thou shalt not murder, doesn't blink twice at your AR-15 ban. Okay, he doesn't read your gun-free zone signs. He sees those signs and he says, this is an invitation for me. Gun control doesn't stop evil. It disarms good people. The founding fathers didn't give us the Second Amendment so we could go hunting. They gave us the Second Amendment to protect ourselves against tyrants, both foreign and domestic. And newsflash, tyrants don't tend to announce themselves. They come wearing smiles and waving around fancy policies. And I also want to talk about self-defense today. Self-defense. The average police response time in big cities like Chicago could be up to 10 minutes, sometimes even longer. I know the Chicago PD is really struggling with that. Response times in rural areas, it could get up to even 30 minutes response time. So if somebody kicks down your door, are you going to ask them to wait until the government sends backup to protect you, or are you going to protect your family and take matters into your own hands? So grandma, okay, in Peoria, Illinois, she is just trying to defend her property, but yet she's the one treated like a criminal. She has to go through all kinds of crazy background checks, permits, training. And the thug in Chicago, he gets the gun out of his trunk in an alley, and he didn't think twice about our laws, okay? It's about power. It always has been. Every dictatorship in history has disarmed their citizens first. First, that's Stalin, that's Hitler, that's Mao. They didn't want competition. And once the guns were gone, so were the rights, the freedom, and the people. So a disarmed people is a controlled people. But an armed, faithful, and free people, that is a nightmare for tyrants. And really, it's a blessing to your neighbors if you are armed. The Second Amendment isn't outdated. It's eternal. And just like evil, just like our right, Just like the evil has the right to do evil things and that they will, we have the right to resist evil and to arm ourselves. And the Second Amendment is pretty dang clear, shall not be infringed. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. Hey, good morning. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. I'm actually looking at the press release by the St. Charles Police Department about that bomb threat. It's so interesting, the headlines, how this was reported. They say that there was like a potential bomb threat. So in the press release, it says the St. Charles Police Department, in coordination with Kane County Sheriff's Office, Bomb Squad, and the Explosive Detection Canine Unit, conducted a thorough search of the area. No explosive devices were found. The area was secured, but they responded to a report of a, quote, potential bomb threat. Now, I don't know what the hell that means. Like, is it a bomb threat or not? And, it's interesting that I haven't been able to find really anything outside of that. Like, potential bomb threat, automatically alarm bells are going off in my head. I'm like, okay, like, how credible was this bomb threat? Okay, the fact that you guys are calling it a potential bomb threat in your press release tells me all I really need to know. But the initial bomb threat, so there were two, was reported to the police by the Q Center. This was in St. Charles. I think it's like a hotel. That's where the Texas Democrats were at. And in both instances, no explosives were found. All designated areas were deemed safe. So they are investigating. But like, what really is there to investigate? Did somebody make a bomb threat or not? And I love the word potential bomb threat, which tells me that this isn't all that credible. That's why I said, hey, I don't even think the bomb threats were all that credible. I mean, they definitely didn't find anything. Okay. And the fact in their press releases, they're calling it a potential bomb threat. So like, is it or is it not? Did somebody say that there was a bomb or did they not? And just the way that they've reported this tells me that it wasn't serious. Maybe it was some lunatic who, wrote something on social media that they took the wrong way. I don't know, because they don't tell us, and they probably never will. It'll probably be printed, on the 9th page in the 14th paragraph that, it was actually on somebody on social media who, said that the Texas Democrats were there and, said something a little bit off color on social media, something very, very like not deemed a bomb threat. Okay, so like they won't even come out and say that it was an actual bomb threat. They're calling it a potential bomb threat. Like I said, the Texans, they need to start electing lions, not runners. Proverbs 28, verse 1, it says, "The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion." These people are not bold. They're obviously runners. They fled from their duty, and they obviously lost their fight to stand for democracy, because they're headed home now. They're packing up, even though they're declaring victory. They definitely lost due to Republican pressure. And look, you can't claim victory in the middle of defeat. This is the oldest, dumbest political trick in the book, where they lose a fight and then they pretend that they meant to lose this fight, that this was just to generate awareness. Yeah, give me a break. This was political theater and virtue signaling. You know it. I know it. Friends, I want to talk about this bill. There's this old saying, if you're not careful, the cure will be worse than the disease. Okay, have you heard of that saying? And boy, here in Illinois, we have politicians who live for that saying, live for that. They always develop a cure, and the cure winds up worse than the disease. So this brings me to Senate Bill 2040. This passed unanimously. So I'm going to take aim at some Republicans here. I mean, obviously, all of them voted for this, and they're all patting themselves on the back like they just solved world hunger. I don't like this bill. What is this bill about? It's about predatory towing. Now, don't get me wrong. Nobody likes the guy who shows up with the hook, okay, and tows your car and, holds it hostage. Nobody really likes that. Nobody likes paying the towing fees. But here's the thing. We already have laws for the guy who holds your car hostage. It's called extortion. It's called fraud. We already have laws on the books to keep bad actors accountable. We have criminal statutes, theft, fraud, extortion. These are things that you cannot do. Okay, we don't need a brand new layer of government, which this bill does, to enforce something that we can handle through existing law. Unless, of course, the reason why they did this was to expand power. And the real goal here is just power and expanding the authority of the government. And folks, this is Illinois. We know better. We know where these things lead. At first, they say that this is all about safety and consumer protection. And the next thing you know, you've got your small town towing company buried in compliance paperwork. They're facing an ICC, an Illinois commerce officer, okay, with the power to impound their tow truck, because of some technical violation that they didn't even really know that they violated. So buckle up. Today, we are breaking down this bill and how it's not actually protecting you. Really what this does, it just expands government power and it weakens potentially small business. And this is just adding another notch into Governor JB Pritzker's "look what I did" belt, or "I did something" belt. So this is just another one of those notches in his belt. And this was Democrat-sponsored legislation. Like, I don't understand why Republicans vote yes for any Democrat-sponsored legislation. If I was a legislator, I would vote no all of the time. Just out of principle, because they have the supermajority. They don't need my vote in order to get it passed. Okay, so why would I vote for something if they don't even need my vote to get it passed? Okay, they have the supermajority. So this is just another one of those things that, Pritzker can write up a press release on, and some of these Democrats who voted for it or sponsored it, they can write up a press release and say, look, I did something, even though that something could potentially make things worse. The cure is worse than the disease. Okay, remember that. So the problem they are claiming to solve. Now, the ICC, this is a Illinois state agency. This is the Illinois Commerce Commission. That is the ICC. Okay. And they have done studies, and a lot of the studies that I've seen, the stats aren't even all that bad if you really take a second to bring this into reality. They have said that there are in 2023, there was over 500 predatory, quote unquote, predatory tows. So that's their stat, the ICC. Okay, so a reality check for most of you. Out of the millions of vehicles in Illinois, that's a fraction of a percent. Okay, 500 predatory tows. Now, this was just in the Chicago area, but think of that. There's hundreds upon thousands of cars in Chicago, in the Chicago area. Okay, that's still a small percentage of the vehicles. Okay, so we don't write laws, or at least we shouldn't write laws, entire new laws of mass enforcement power. So that's what this is. It's sweeping enforcement power, mass enforcement power for a problem that's very small. Okay. We typically don't write laws for that unless there is an ulterior motive. And this is also a problem they're claiming to solve. Many of those cases are already covered by existing consumer protection laws. Okay, there are consumer protection laws out there. There are existing local ordinances surrounding towing and bad business practices. Okay, theft, fraud, extortion, all of that. Okay, so a question for this audience that I have: do you trust the Illinois Commerce Commission, the same folks who, by the way, rubber stamped rate hikes, the Ameren rate hikes, the ComEd rate hikes for your electric bill, the same folks who rubber stamped or pushed for the Grain Belt Express to come to the state of Illinois, which is this dumb gay wind power transmission line that was going to cost $4.9 billion in federal loans. Thank God Donald Trump canceled that. The Grain Belt Express. This was a transmission line from like Kansas all the way to Indiana. The ICC pushed for that despite, grassroots opposition. The ICC, not good folks. They pushed for carbon pipelines, carbon sequestration pipelines. Are you going to trust those folks, to suddenly be the white knight on tow trucks, to be your white knight on tow trucks and to be your superhero? Like, come on. This is like hiring a fox to guard the chicken coop, except the fox says, don't worry, I've got a license now. So that's essentially what we did with this bill. We gave the fox a license to guard the chicken coop. Okay, so SB 2040, what it does, the ICC has the power to impound tow trucks, not just fine them. They used to be able to just fine them. That's a huge escalation of power. The ICC is an unelected bureaucratic body. It's a state agency. Nobody in your town voted for them, yet they can shut down your business pretty much overnight if they wanted to, by impounding your tow truck if you have a small tow truck. Now, what this does, it bans tow truck drivers from monitoring police scanners, which is kind of ingenious if you ask me, like listening to police scanners and then they'd show up to accidents. And what it does, it bans them from listening to police scanners unless they're officially called to the scene. Sounds nice, but it wipes out legitimate independent operators who used to rely on those quick responses. Like, it's just kind of like a smart, savvy business practice, in my opinion, listening to a police scanner if you're a tow trucker. Like, you're listening to a police scanner, oh, there's an accident. I'm going to drive by, see if they need a tow, right? The towing associations supposedly backed this bill, by the way, but in Illinois politics, what you need to know is that these associations, if they back these bills, typically that means it's a big corporate operator who backs these bills, and they were in the room when deciding on these bills and negotiating these bills, and the mom and pop guys were never invited. That's typically what that means. So everybody seems to be for this, but like when I read it, I'm like, whoa, we just gave the ICC a ton of power. I don't like the ICC. I don't trust the ICC. They're foxes. Okay, so in Illinois, every time a regulatory agency gets more power, it grows and grows and grows. It never shrinks. They never give themselves less power. Okay, so the ICC enforcement means obviously more staffing. So they're going to have, they can now impound tow trucks. So that means more taxpayer dollars. That means more budgets, more justification for higher licensing fees, by the way. So they deal with licensing fees, the fines, and they might increase fines. And they might justify that by saying, well, our agency has to increase fines in order to keep more staffing on to, deal with this enforcement power. So who benefits from this bill? Probably like low or large towing companies. That's who I'd guess, because they can obviously absorb the compliance cost. Who loses? These independent operators, these small town rural tow truck guys who have a hook on the back of their truck, okay, and have a small business. Those guys obviously aren't going to be able to keep up with the compliance costs. If their vehicle or if their tow truck is impounded, it's probably going to take them years to get it back because they don't have the money. So likely, I'd imagine this is just going to help large towing companies. Now, another thing that people aren't talking about with this bill is that this is a Chicago problem. And this is statewide punishment. Okay, this is Chicago problem, statewide punishment written all over it. If there are bad actors, criminals, okay, then we need to hold them accountable under the law. If they are holding cars hostage, so for example, if you're a tow truck driver in Chicago and you're a bad actor and you come up and you tow somebody's truck away or car away, and she's got a car seat in the back and she can't afford to get her car out of the impound lot right away, but she needs her car seat, if you hold on to that and use it as pretty much as ransom, and you say, no, you have to pay me, otherwise you can't get your car seat, that's theft. It's extortion. Okay. They're frauding people. And they should be held accountable under already existing consumer protection laws. Okay. So, and not to mention, this is a Chicago problem, which it shouldn't shock us that it's a Chicago problem because it's a criminal problem. And we all know that Chicago doesn't address its crime. So why would we expect them to address crime when it comes to bad businesses or predatory businesses? For example, let's look at a downstate tow operator, just a downstate small town tow operator. He gets tangled up in ICC bureaucracy over some paperwork issues, and then they impound his tow vehicle because they have that authority now. But really, the real crux here are the Chicago, bad actors. They adapt to the ICC bureaucracy, and then they keep scamming people. Okay, that's what's going to wind up happening. The bad actors they want to fight or combat, they're going to keep scamming, keep getting away with everything because why? They're criminals, and they're not going to abide by the law. And really, who gets caught up in everything and in the bureaucracy and in the impounding enforcement is the downstate small tow trucker. I don't know if that's a correct term. Sorry. If you're a tow truck operator, throw in the comment section. Let me know if that's a bad term to call you a tow trucker. The Christian worldview. Okay. Scripture warns us about unjust weights and measures, meaning fairness matters in business and in justice. Government should not be punishing they should be about punishing the guilty, but they should not and be about protecting the innocent. Okay, so they should go about punishing the guilty and protecting the innocent, not punishing everyone, hoping to catch a few bad actors. Okay, and that's what this bill does. I think that it's a fishnet. They throw it out there and they hope that they catch a few bad actors with it. Really, what they're doing is they're punishing everyone, and we're just expanding the powers of government with this bill. So Proverbs 29:2, it says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people mourn. So this bill mourns small business freedom in the name of solving a problem that's already solvable. Okay, so we, at the expense of small business freedom, we came up with a solution that we already have a solution for, or a solution to a problem that we already have a solution for. We have existing consumer protection laws. You can't rob people. You can't extort people in business. And if that happens, take them to small court claims or civil court. We have laws. We have criminal court. A lot of that is criminal, theft, extortion. You can file a police report, right? We already have laws in the book to deal with bad actors like that in all forms of business. Okay, so I think of lemon laws, for example. If there's somebody who sells you a lemon, a car, that's bad. There's consumer protection laws to protect you already out there that exist. Okay, why are we giving more enforcement power to a government bureaucracy when we already have an enforcement mechanism in place? Coming to a street near you, the Illinois Commerce Commission, new elite unit, the Tow Patrol, armed with clipboards, safety vests, and taxpayer-funded coffee budgets. They're ready to roll. This is your tire pressure? Is your tire PSI too low in one of your tires? Did you respond to an accident without permission? Did your tow hook look a little funny to us? Well, you're going downtown, buddy. That's essentially what the Illinois Commerce Commission, they are going to have, their little clipboards, their little safety vests, and they're going to go out there and they're going to start impounding vehicles. And they never stay within the confines of their power. They always take or go a mile when we give them an inch, when you give them more power. So I could imagine, if you responded to an accident and, you say something like, oh, I saw this accident. I was driving by. I'm a tow truck. I'm a guy who has a hook and I offered them a tow so that way I could make money, get them off the road, win, win, win. Then they're going to accuse you of listening to a police scanner and responding to an accident without permission. And then they're going to impound your vehicle, which is just an overreach of power. So they said, oh, you're going downtown, buddy. We're going to take you downtown and we're going to take your truck and we're going to impound your truck. That's what's going to wind up happening. And you're just trying to do business. You're just trying to live your life. And because nothing says consumer protection like stranding motorists, okay, because the only tow truck in town is in the ICC impound lot. Okay, I could imagine that this is what's going to happen. You've got one tow, like in my hometown, Braidwood, Illinois, we had one tow truck guy. Okay, everybody would call him. And he's just a small business operator, definitely not the type of guy to probably make sure all of his paperwork is in a row, like his I's are crossed or his I's are dotted, his T's are crossed, probably not that type of guy. Definitely would ride by an accident, stop and offer a tow, right? Or listen to even police scanners and see like, or call the police like, hey, any accidents today that I got to go by. And see if they need tows, if he's caught, driving by an accident, offering a tow without being called out there or without getting permission to be out there at that accident, that scene, then his tow truck's going to be impounded. And he's the only guy that does tows in that rural community, in that rural city, rural town. And the next time a motorist is stranded, guess what? The only tow truck in town is in the ICC impound lot. Yeah, that's not really like consumer protection, is it? Next up, the ICC is going to be confiscating your snow shovels for clearing people's driveways if you don't have a license or permission to do that. That's essentially what this is like, this bill. So they're going to confiscate those snow shovels. So in the wintertime, I could imagine the ICC, this is probably the next bill that they're going to come up with and then pass unanimously because why? I don't know. They are going to confiscate your snow shovel because how dare you show up to your neighbor's yard without permission, and take a snow shovel and shovel out their driveway. How dare you do that without a license or without ICC approval or not within the confines of our regulatory systems? Okay, so what should have been done instead with this bill? What should have been done was, hey, enforce the existing laws. We have laws on fraud. We have laws on theft. We have laws on extortion. We also have the avenue of taking someone to civil court. So if they hold your vehicle, you can take them and sue them for bad business practices, all right? But a lot of this stuff is criminal, like fraud, theft, extortion. You can file a police report, okay? And really, we should have targeted the problem areas. If Chicago really had a problem with predatory tows, why wasn't a local ordinance done? Why did we have to do state legislation and impose a one-size-fit-all bill on the whole state of Illinois, which includes those rural areas where there's only one sometimes case? In my case, Braidwood, Illinois, we had like one tow truck driver. What happens if he shows up to an accident without permission? That's in violation of what they can do now under this bill. And it allows the ICC to impound his truck. Now you're leaving motorists stranded everywhere, and that's not consumer protection. That's dangerous. So really what we should do is just require, transparency. There's business practices, price listing, clear paperwork. They're already required to do that. They're required to return personal property. We could have just done something very simple like that, require that of towing businesses and of businesses in general, right? To be transparent. We didn't have to, if I was a Republican and we had to do something about the predatory towing, which, why? Because it's just Chicago problem. It sounds like they're not enforcing the law and that there are criminals possibly illegal aliens even, getting tow hooks and extorting the citizenry there in the Chicago area. It sounds like just a Chicago problem. I wouldn't have wanted to deal with it as a state legislator anyway. But if I had to deal with it, like, we could have just required more things of the towing industry. We didn't have to expand the powers of the ICC. That's where I'm starting to like really raise my eyebrows at this. We could have given local law enforcement more authority, like the sheriff's offices, the police departments more authorities, rather than a government or like a state agency like the ICC. We should have just empowered our local law enforcement. Hell, I wouldn't have even been totally opposed to giving grants to local law enforcement officers to stop predatory towers. Okay. Like, hey, hire a guy who works with the tow companies in the area and make sure that the police are policing. Like, I wouldn't even be totally opposed to that if it truly is a problem, giving the local law enforcement more authority. But what we did was expand the ICC, which is a state agency. So you need to call your state representatives, all of them, because all of them voted yes. So your state representative and your senator voted yes on this thing. And I want you to call them and say, hey, you know, why'd you vote that way? I want you to make them rethink their vote in giving the ICC more power. This was a terrible bill, in my opinion. I want you to encourage folks to speak up for small town businesses that will be potentially crushed under this. A lot of times in small towns, there is a one tow truck driver. And if this one tow truck driver slips up and accidentally violates ICC regulations, like responding to an accident without permission, then he gets his truck impounded. And guess what? Motorists don't have a tow truck in that rural community anymore. So remind them that, hey, you know, this unanimous vote, it doesn't mean it's a good bill. Just because everybody's voting for it doesn't mean that you had to vote for it, and you could have been that lone no vote, okay, and face the political backlash, okay? I think a lot of times what happens is you've got these unanimous bills that sound all sweet and like, who would be opposed to, you know, combating predatory towers? Who would be opposed to bad actors, you know? And it sounds sweet. And then you look at the crux of the bill, and the crux is like expanding the powers of the ICC. And you're like, wait a second, this expands government. It's big government. I'm opposed to that as a Republican. But, you know, whatever. I don't want to be the lone vote. I don't want to be the lone no vote and face political backlash. Okay, so that happens a lot of times in the state house. This is what Illinois does best. They find a small problem, and really this is the feminization of government. They find a small problem. They make it sound big because biologically women are trained to do that in their brains. It's something that happens in motherhood where your brain goes to worst possible scenario. Okay, and then you try to address that as a mother, right? So say your kid skins his knee. What's the worst possible scenario? Well, it gets infected and he gets sick, right? So you're trained to think that way. So that way you take care of the wound. You know, that's how women are trained to think. They take a small problem, they tend to exaggerate it a bit, and then they fix it in a way that creates bigger problems. Okay. That's what Illinois is just great at, because they don't go about these things logically. Okay, they get a few people up there to spill their sob story about how a predatory tower once in this one county in Chicago extorted or used his power against me and frauded me. You know, all things that we can combat with consumer protection laws that we already have on the books. And we don't ask why these things happen. You know, well, why was this guy able to do business despite him doing fraud? Why did this person not go to the police when this stuff happened. You know, this predatory tower came up and impounded her vehicle and pretty much held her car seat ransom. Okay. Like, we don't ask the why. We don't think about this logically. And how we have the tools already a lot of the time to address the problems. We already have the laws on the books. And, you know, I just think that this is another case of Chicago crime just going unchecked. And really, we have the mechanisms in place to combat this type of crime, like other things like illegal immigration. We have the capability for local law enforcement to work with ICE. We just choose not to do it. So a free people, we're not going to stay free if we accept and if we just lie down and let the government get more and more power. So real liberty means saying, no thanks, we've already got this handled. And on SB 2040, Illinois should have said exactly that. Your Illinois lawmaker should have said, no thanks, we already got this handled. We should be handling it because we have these laws in place. We have this local law enforcement agency. They should be holding these bad actors accountable in their districts and in Chicago. Because really, this was a Chicago problem. It wasn't even like, that's not happening in rural communities where people are preying on, you know, people and holding their cars hostage and upping the fees randomly. Like, that's fraud, you know. All right, I do have to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Eric Swalwell. He's in the news today, and he's upset about Donald Trump's move here to federalize DC, which, you know, somebody pointed out, like, it's already like the District of Columbia is already under the control of federal government. So, like, I don't even know exactly what they're all mad about. They're saying, like, fascism, tyranny, because he federalized DC. But I thought it was pretty much already federalized anyway. You know, like, I thought DC was under the control of the federal government anyway because it's the capital. But Eric Swalwell has got his panties in a bunch, really, over this move, in my opinion. So, Representative Eric Swalwell, he posted something on X, which actually makes Donald Trump's point for him. So he really should put, like, his foot in his mouth. You know, he should not have posted this on X. I'm going to take a quick break, but we're going to be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Welcome back to Conservative Cat Clips, where we claw through the lies and we lay out the truth. No filter, no fluff. I'm your host, Kat, and we're tackling the abortion debacle today, but this time we're pulling back the curtain on abortion's ugly origin story. Let's talk about Margaret Sanger, founder of what would become Planned Parenthood. The left treats her like some sort of feminist hero, but they conveniently leave out where she was a eugenicist and she spoke at KKK rallies, and she wanted to, quote, weed out the unfit. Her words, not mine, folks. In a 1938 letter, Sanger wrote about her plans to target Black communities, and I quote, "We do not want the word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population." Does that sound like they're trying to hide something, doesn't it? Planned Parenthood was built on this ideology, and Sanger didn't want to empower women. She wanted to control population growth, particularly among minorities, the poor, and the disabled, anyone she and her elite pals deemed less desirable. That's who she wanted to weed out. And guess what? The legacy still haunts the abortion industry today. Don't believe me? Look at the numbers. Black women make up about 13% of the population, but they account for nearly 40% of all abortions. You think that's by accident? No, ma'am. That's what's called targeted marketing and deception. They're marketing abortion to Black women. So while the media glamorizes abortion as freedom, let's be real. It started with a woman who thought freedom meant eliminating the weak. And while the left tears down statues of long dead so-called racists, they keep handing out awards named after Margaret Sanger. Hypocrisy much? The left is tearing down these statues, but yet they're handing out awards named after Margaret Sanger. Now, I know some folks are going to say, well, that was a long time ago, Kat, sure. But Planned Parenthood is still the nation's largest abortion provider. They're still planting clinics in these low-income minority neighborhoods, and they're marketing abortions to minorities. And they were raking in $500 million of taxpayer dollars, by the way, every year. And just until recently, President Donald Trump signed this executive order to end the federal taxpayer dollars to fund and promote elective abortion. The order recognizes that for nearly 5 decades, Congress enacted a little something called the Hyde Amendment. It's a series of additional laws to protect taxpayers from being forced to pay for abortion. That's what the Hyde Amendment does. Contrary to this longstanding common sense policy, the previous administration, Joe Biden, they dedicated all kinds of federal funding to elective abortion and a wide variety of government programs. This isn't about women's health. It's about politics, power, and profit. The future, it's up to us. In a post-Roe world, gives us this chance to right historic wrongs. We need laws that protect the unborn, support women, and finally shut down the lie that abortion is some kind of virtue. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. I'm Kat, reminding you that the truth has claws and history doesn't lie. Margaret Sanger's past isn't just history, it's the foundation of a system that we are fighting today. Stand tall, speak out, and choose life. Hey, good morning. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. President Donald Trump, he made a move here in Washington, D.C. to federalize D.C., which is just, I don't know what the big deal is because D.C., from what I understood, was under federal control anyway. So, I just think the move is brilliant because not only is this going to be providing some desperately necessary... So I think what he's doing is federalizing the city police there. Okay, so I think D.C. is already under the control of the federal government, but he took it a step further and federalized the police there, the D.C. police. So not only is this going to provide desperately needed law enforcement to help the residents there, but also it's exposing how crazy the Democrats really are. And this brings me to Eric Swalwell, because they are trying to argue against this. And really what they're arguing against is a solution to the crime problem that is going on in D.C. I've gone to D.C. before. Right after the crime problem, Donald Trump should do something about the rat problem because I was walking down the street as a tourist. I went there to go tour the Capitol. And it was like a little bit dark right after dinner. We were walking and man, so many rats. So they really need to deal with the rat problem there as well, right after they deal with the crime problem. But it's so funny because it really exposes how crazy these Democrats are because they're really just arguing against Donald Trump. They're attacking Donald Trump. It exposes their TDS because who would argue with dealing with crime? And that brings me to Eric Swalwell. This was a really bad move on his part. He posted this. I'm going to share this with you. This is on X. Trump owns it. So I talked about this yesterday. This happened just a couple of blocks away from a left-wing protest, and this was happening in the northwest quadrant of DC, which is kind of known for not being super crime-riddled. There's some elites. Your white wine moms are there in the northwest quadrant, and they were all protesting, Donald Trump, and they said Donald Trump needs to resign. They had a big banner that said Donald Trump must leave now. And just a couple of blocks away from the protest, the left-wing protest, the TDS protest, there was a guy who died. And I don't want to make light of this because this guy died in the shooting, and officers are looking for the suspect. And he died. This was a shooting that just happened a couple of blocks away from that protest. So he posted this, Eric Swalwell, and he says, Trump owns it, as if the shooting is his fault because he owns it. Okay, so he posted the shooting death in D.C. on the same day that President Donald Trump made his announcement. Okay, so Trump hadn't done anything yet, obviously. These people are so ridiculous. He hadn't done anything yet, but Swalwell is arguing that Trump owns it and that this shooting is his fault. Talk about the height of idiocracy, like so stupid. Okay, I made the point yesterday that, why are you protesting Donald Trump federalizing the police department here? Because right a couple of blocks away from your protest, there was a shooting where a guy died. So not only does that tweet make Donald Trump not look bad, okay, it doesn't make him look bad at all. It actually helps prove his point even more. Democrats were trying to argue that there wasn't really a problem, okay, that there wasn't really a crime problem, and that Donald Trump should just stay out of it, and that it should be left up to the DC officials and to the law enforcement officials. So here, Swalwell turns around and proves that there actually is a problem. So the Democrats said, oh, there is no real crime problem. Swalwell is proving that there is a problem by reposting the shooting that happened. Thanks, Eric. And boy, are you bad at this. Don't know who allowed him to make that tweet and post that tweet. Don't know, but you should really invest in better comms people or better PR people. So the Democrats, they have said up to this point that there is no crime and that the city is fine. And now they're probably going to switch their tune, much like Eric Swalwell. They're going to say that crime is so much worse now that Donald Trump has taken over. So are you saying the Democrats owned all the crime that has happened in the city, that they have had complete control over the day before, and then the day later, you're claiming that it's Donald Trump's fault and that he has complete control over all the crime just a day later? And I don't even know. I think that the shooting happened prior to, he made a press conference and then the shooting happened shortly after that. Like, clearly he hadn't done anything to address the crime in DC yet. There was no real move made by the Trump administration at that point. It all happened on the same day. Trump isn't responsible for the crime in DC. That is happening now, okay, and happened yesterday. Now, I'm sure it's going to get cleaned up pretty quickly. He isn't responsible for the crime there. It's the Democrats who have controlled that city for years. Year after year after year, they have failed to address the crime. So Democrats should welcome the help there in DC. They don't want to admit their policies have failed. And Swalwell is kind of opening up this new window into their next dumb tactic, which is to blame Donald Trump for the crime that's currently going on this week. While he has taken over, or while he has, assumed control over the DC area, federalized the DC area, they're going to try to blame Donald Trump for every future crime in DC. And that is just ridiculous, and I'm sure even with, there's still going to be crime that's committed, but every single crime that's committed in DC, they're going to blame it on Donald Trump. Nothing these people ever say makes any sense, by the way. It's always constructed around anti-Trump. And they don't care, obviously, about the guy who was killed here, because if they cared about the guy who was killed, they would welcome the National Guard to come in and help law enforcement crack down on the crime. They were more focused on making a political point. Obviously, Eric Swalwell was more focused on that, and he didn't even say anything in this tweet, nothing about the victim of the crime. He just says Trump owns it. So every future crime that happens in DC, you can expect the Democrats to say that it's Donald Trump's fault, which is ridiculous. Jamie Raskin, he also managed to stick his foot in his mouth in a similar way, and he was attacking the Trump action to federalize the police department there. And what's funny here is that Raskin, he stepped into the trap, okay? So he argued that crime in DC wasn't an emergency, okay? And this is obviously a ridiculous argument, because anybody who lives there, anybody who visits DC knows that the crime is an emergency. And we know that him coming out and saying that crime is an emergency is literally just an argument. It's a ridiculous argument. And the sole purpose of it is to oppose Donald Trump. Okay, because I'm sure the citizens there in DC wouldn't receive his message that, hey, crime is an emergency here very well. I'm sure that message frustrates the citizens of DC. Let's take a listen to Jamie Raskin and what he had to say here about the crime in DC.
Well, he's referring to a provision in the DC Home Rule Act, which allows him to declare a police emergency relating to a federal matter. They haven't defined what the emergency is, especially with crime rates at a 30-year low in the District of Columbia. And he's deployed the National Guard. At least I'm happy to see that he acknowledges he has the power to activate the National Guard. That was what he refused to do 4.5 years ago when the Capitol and his own vice president and Congress were under attack by the mob violence that he unleashed against us. And he sat on his hands for many hours and then later asserted he somehow didn't have the authority to deploy the National Guard. That was a real emergency. This is not a real emergency. He was not asked to send in the National Guard or take over the police by the House or the Senate or the mayor or the DC Council. This looks to me like an emergency which is manufactured because of a public relations crisis relating to the Epstein file. He doesn't want to release the Epstein file, so he wants everybody to look in another direction.
Oh boy. Okay, number one, Donald Trump is all about holding Epstein and the people he trafficked the humans to accountable. Okay, that's very clear. Pam Bondi's deputy, the FBI deputy director, or her deputy, basically her number two, went and has been trying to work out a deal with Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay, number one, to try to find or to try to get names of people he trafficked humans to. And really, I think Tulsi Gabbard is the one who has to declassify or unseal these court documents. Like, judges don't even get these documents and they are sealed. And I don't think Donald Trump has seen, like, judges haven't even seen these. I don't think Donald Trump has seen the sealed documents. And I think that's really up to the CIA and the intelligence communities to unseal those court documents. Yes, they need to go after Jeffrey Epstein and the people that were on the island and the people that he trafficked humans to. I don't think that he's been briefed on these documents, but I'm sure Donald Trump knows that if they unseal these court documents and start naming these names, that is going to have an effect on the global economy. So, I mean, we would probably be looking at a Great Depression, okay, of some kind, because there's going to be bankers on there, possibly foreign ministers, I don't know, prime ministers, who knows, who's all on those lists. But I will say that I think everybody is trying to be as transparent as they can. And really, it's up to the United States intelligence communities, the CIA, possibly Tulsi Gabbard, to unseal those court documents. And even then, you know, it might be hard for them to do that. So I think everybody has been very clear. Donald Trump, had it not been for Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein would have never been arrested. He cooperated with the feds that ultimately led to the arrest of Jeffrey Epstein. Okay. I hate when the libs are out there, you know, and I get them in here, the chat here, and they troll and they say things like he's a pedophile and a child sex trafficker. That's totally not true. Had not, and under his administration, they jailed Jeffrey Epstein, okay, his first term. So, yeah, you can't sit there and say that he's pro-Epstein, okay? You can't go that far. It's tricky. It's a tricky situation, and there are things that we're dealing with, or that the Trump administration is dealing with, like court-sealed documents, okay, by our intelligence agencies. And the intelligence agencies really are the ones who should be answering for the Epstein files being sealed. Okay, so I want to get to Jamie Raskin because he had to check with the residents here. I think that they would disagree with him when he says things like, it is not an emergency, the crime there that's going on. I think that they disagree with him. I know the DC Police Union would disagree with him. They actually support and they are grateful that Trump made this move to federalize the police department, because they didn't like the way things were being done before. Okay, so however, the situation is very, very different. He brought up January 6th. January 6th is very, very different than what's going on in DC right now, as far as the crime goes. Okay, the deployment to the Capitol differs from the deployment in DC. Okay, there is a National Guard deployment that is going on in DC. As I've reported in the past, the Trump team reached out to the Capitol Police on January 6th and asked if they wanted the National Guard. The Capitol Police chief explained that he turned it down before January 6th because he did not have the permission of the Congressional Sergeant at Arms. He called out the police chief at the time, Nancy Pelosi, it was all Nancy Pelosi's fault, really, why they didn't have the National Guard. Okay, the police chief there said that he didn't have the permission of the Congressional Sergeant at Arms, Nancy Pelosi. And actually, Nancy Pelosi came out, had a similar argument to Raskin here on Donald Trump. And she was called out on that, on that attack, this attack that mirrors Raskin's attack, because really it was her fault that the National Guard, Trump did, and I've reported this several times, ask if they wanted the National Guard, the Capitol Police. Okay, they denied it, and the police chief at the time, said he didn't have the permission of the Congressional Sergeant at Arms, Nancy Pelosi. Okay, so this is just extreme gaslighting. What's going on here? They brought up January 6th. They always deflect from the real present issues that are clearly their fault. And, this question, I want to get to this one from Raskin to the CNN host here. Her name is Cassie Hunt, is truly funny. Let's take a listen to this. Here we go.
But people don't always feel the statistics, right? Do you, as someone who, works in the District of Columbia, you drive through it all the time, you know a lot of people who live here all the time, do you feel like crime is down in DC compared to other more recent years?
Well, definitely when you compare it to, other periods in the history of Washington, D.C., when there was, very serious spikes in crime and it, felt really dangerous to go out. But look, I agree, you can't feel safe enough, especially these days. The question is who you trust to promote your security and public safety. Is it the mayor and the council and the people who actually report to people who live there? Or do you trust Donald Trump to do that? Because, his attention span is 32 seconds. And then he's going to be off to talking about the tariffs, or he's going to be off and talking about something in Los Angeles or whatever. I mean, you've got to trust the local officials to do this. And, there's something that's very fraudulent about what's taking place. He also.
Okay. So is he kidding? I don't know if he just doesn't think before he speaks. Open mouth and insert your foot now, Jamie Raskin. The people who run DC, you want us to trust them. These are the folks who haven't solved the problem. Okay, these are the folks who have let this problem fester for years. That should answer your question right there. Who do we trust? Well, not the people who have been there, okay? Not the local politicians who have seemed to make the problems worse. Even the police union has called out these radical policies, these progressive policies in DC, and have said that they need to be changed. So who do you trust in this situation to truly address the problem? Yes, it's Donald Trump. I trust him all day, every day. He's the guy who gets things done. He's the guy who cleaned up the border, fixed the border after Joe Biden made things worse. He's the guy who's bringing peace in numerous countries. And he might actually bring something a little bit better to Washington, D.C. if we just let him. Okay, and these politicians can say whatever the hell they want. But the bottom line is that the people in D.C. Know that there's a problem. They've had to deal with this problem, and the people in charge of the problem have not done anything, and they've let this problem fester. Actually, Joe Scarborough of MSNBC actually admitted on the Morning Joe show that, Trump's actions are to be cheered. Okay, so some Democrats are even privately cheering this. He admitted this on his Morning Joe show that, this is a good action. The DC Police Union explained that a long-term solution would be to get more staff on board and then to have fewer radical policies. But as a matter of emergency, Donald Trump in this action, he is providing more bodies, obviously boots on the ground, and that is going to go a long way to help them in this state of emergency. And I just find it so funny. The Democrats, crime in DC is really rare. Just a couple of days ago, and they said federal intervention is unnecessary, and this is an unnecessary action by Donald Trump. And then now they've got to spin it and move the goalpost in DC as now all of a sudden it's Donald Trump's fault. Just a couple of hours after Trump made this move, they're going to start changing and moving the goalpost and changing the narrative. Swalwell, Democrats like Jamie Raskin, they take positions that are really unserious, and the people see it for what it is. All right, you guys have a blessed day. Bye-bye. Love you so much. Smash that like button while you're here and subscribe to the channel. Share this out with a friend and tell them to subscribe. Be sure to visit patriotpumpenergy.com and buy your bottle of pre-workout today using promo code ConservativeCat. I'll catch you tomorrow.